So, whatever happened to that highly beloved yet super gritty dystopian science fiction classic starring Harrison Ford and Rutger Hauer, 1982's Blade Runner? Let's find out. Movies, music, and monsters. Danger. Hey, my friends, Dan Monroe here from Movies, Music, and Monsters. Okay, here we go. Blade Runner, probably one of the most requested videos that I've gotten from you guys to talk about. I very specifically remember watching this film for the first time, I think on HBO, way back in like 1983. I was super excited to see Harrison Ford in something other than Star Wars, and I hate to admit it, but I gotta be honest with you guys. The first time I saw this film when I was like 15 years old, I was bored out of my mind. Not because it was a bad story or anything, but simply because my expectations of going into it were a little bit more Star Wars than Blade Runner.
Let me guess. It needed more lasers.
But later on, as my frontal lobe slowly matured, I watched it again, I think in college, and then again most recently for this deep dive. I saw a really beautiful 4K version, and even though it wasn't really an enormous success when it first came out, I can certainly see why it's become such a classic sci-fi film that's beloved by audiences all over the world. Okay, but exactly which version of this film are we discussing today?
It honestly doesn't matter. All 7 versions are all virtually identical. But let me guess, you watched the final director's cut.
Correctamundo, and here's how it kind of breaks down. There were 5 versions of this film that are most commonly known to the fans, including the original work print, the U.S. theatrical cut, the international cut, the director's cut, and eventually the final cut, which is essentially Ridley Scott's ultimate version that he had complete control over.
And don't forget the San Diego sneak preview cut, which was only shown once.
And also the U.S. broadcast cut, which was edited for television. Yeah, it's really all kind of confusing. Every one of the cuts kind of had their own individual characteristics, but I'm an old soul, and I tend to like the original theatrical cuts of films myself. I mean, I get it. The director ultimately wants to present his or her film the way that they want it out there, but the Star Wars special editions come to mind, so I'm not really completely sure how I feel about that logic. Han shot first. Gah. Anyway, that being said, there is absolutely no way whatsoever to be able to cover all of the immense amount of information on this film in the short amount of time that we've got together, but hopefully we can hit a bunch of super cool, super fun Blade Runner facts and tidbits that maybe you didn't know before. So, grab your basic pleasure model, your converted amber-handled blaster, and your favorite origami unicorn with a bucket of stale popcorn, and let's dive in. Now, to fully understand the origins of this classic sci-fi flick, we gotta go back, way back to 1975, when a gentleman named Hampton Fancher decided that he wanted to write a screenplay and produce a movie, something in the science fiction genre. So, a close friend of his, named Jim Maxwell, suggested taking a look at a novel from 1968 titled Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, which, upon reading it, Fancher didn't really care for the book, at all, but thought that it might be commercial enough to do something with, so he came up with the basic, simple story of a bureaucratic detective chasing androids. Then, around 1978 or so, another friend of his named Brian Kelly provided, $5,000 to get the project going and secure the rights, with the main emphasis behind the entire project as simply being, hey, let's just find a way to make some money. My favorite kind of film, besides K-pop, of course. Producer Michael Dealey, who was also a friend of Brian Kelly's, also read the book and thought it was, kind of unique, but not interesting enough to make an entire film out of, going back to Hampton Fancher, basically saying, okay, go ahead, prove it to me, write something up. So he came up with a very short 5-page synopsis, which, again, didn't impress Michael Dealey at all, who basically said that the whole thing just stinks, more or less taking place in just a couple of rooms, with the film ending with Rachel taking her own life. I mean, honestly, at this point, nothing that was being turned in by Fancher met with the approval of the author of the original novel, feeling that it was just way too, dumbed down with a detective chasing androids. With the original novel deeply diving into the question, what is it that makes us human? And interestingly, this initial Hampton Fancher script did contain a voiceover. Yes, the infamous, notorious, fan-dividing voiceover controversy.
Personally, I liked the voiceover. It gave it a 1940s Robert Mitchum film noir feel, which is what they were really after, and in my opinion, ultimately lost by removing the voiceover.
The storyline of the ecological disaster of Earth falling apart, however, was represented in these early drafts, all of which kept Fancher driving forward, eventually submitting another draft, which was significantly better, and Fancher added in elements of a book that he had seen called Mechanismo, with replicants. He showed the book to Michael Dealey, and they both agreed that this was absolutely the aesthetic that the movie should have visually, and this is interesting. For a short time, the script was actually called Mechanismo until they finally agreed upon a working title of Dangerous Days, and eventually Blade Runner, a title that was suggested by producer Michael Dealey based on the title of another book by Alan Norse called The Blade Runner. Enter director Ridley Scott, who was at that point knee-deep in the editing process for his film Alien and making plans to direct a version of Dune. Michael Dealey brought him the script, still titled Dangerous Days at that point, but believe it or not, Ridley Scott turned it down, basically stating that he had just finished one science fiction film and really didn't want to go directly into another one. But ultimately, fate intervened, and he rather fancied immersing himself into a new project to keep his mind off some of his own personal woes at the time. So he took another long, hard look at the script, this time with visions of a film noir-style science fiction twist, and that, my friends, is essentially how the film Blade Runner was born. Now, according to the actors and the production teams that worked with him, Ridley Scott was, how can I put it, very demanding about what he wanted the camera and essentially the audience to see on screen in his films. Ridley, coming from mostly a TV commercial background, was always seeking an extremely tantalizing visual aspect to all of the scenes, an example of which would be Terrell's office, with projection out the windows, live actors in front of that on the set, tons of very ornate lighting, casting unique shadows and colors over the set, intense visual stimulation, including that really weird watery lighting effect that we see shimmering on the walls. Special effects supervisor Douglas Trumbull asked Ridley point blank, Hey, what's the point of all this watery-looking light effect? Is it raining? What's the deal? And Ridley simply smiled and said, we don't need to explain it. I just want it to look cool. Classic Ridley Scott. Now, when it came time to actually cast the film, that entire process actually ended up being a little more troublesome than they originally expected, especially for the lead role of Deckard. Hampton Fancher envisioned 65-year-old Robert Mitchum actually playing the lead role. Right, from his wheelchair, I can see him now, rolling down the streets of L.A. like Ironside, shooting that super gun of his at that sexy snake chick.
I'd buy that for $1.
No comment. Several other well-known actors were also considered, including Gene Hackman, Sean Connery, Paul Newman, Clint Eastwood, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and, believe it or not, Peter Falk. That certainly would have been interesting. Now the frozen eyeball scene makes more sense. Pardon me there, ma'am. Just one more thing. Have you seen any replicants?
I like your Peter Lorre better.
But in the end, it was Harrison Ford that was ultimately chosen for several reasons. The enormous success of Star Wars, obviously, Ford's personal interest in the Blade Runner story, excited about playing a role with a little more, dramatic bite to it, and finally, discussions with Steven Spielberg, who was just finishing Raiders of the Lost Ark at the time and strongly praised Harrison Ford's work in that film. Rutger Hauer was cast by Ridley Scott without ever even having met him, based on his performances in previous movies like Soldier of Orange and Turkish Delight, with Hauer stating later on that Blade Runner was his favorite film of all the films that he ever made. Fun fact, it took over 3 hours to glue all of the sequins onto the body of Joanna Cassidy. Fun fact, Dan would have done everything in his power to get hired for that position. This is interesting. Fancher originally wrote the role of Rachel for his then-girlfriend, Barbara Hershey, but the part eventually went to a lesser-known yet stunningly beautiful actress named Sean Young, an experimental replicant who believes that she's a human.
Dan believes he's human.
Shh. Exnay on the Umenhay. Looking at this incredibly dystopian and barren future world of Blade Runner, it often makes you wonder what exactly went wrong anyway. Over mining of the Earth, artificial intelligence rebelled and took over everything we knew, or maybe, just maybe, mind you, it had something to do with the fact that every time someone went online, their data was tracked, or worse, their personal information was stolen. Browsing the internet with a connection that is not protected is like accidentally sending a private text message to the entire planet. You didn't mean to, but suddenly the whole world just saw that bad joke that you told to your old college roommate. But having a reliable virtual private network, or VPN for short, means that no matter what you do online on either your home computer or your phone is protected. And what easier way to do that than with today's sponsor, Private Internet Access, or PIA, which protects you from all the prying eyes of hackers, ISPs, government censors, corporates, and who knows what else trying to either view or steal your personal data. PIA protects your entire household with one subscription. Yes, one subscription, meaning you can have an unlimited amount of devices on this VPN at the same time, something that a lot of other companies just don't offer. Trust me, I know. You can watch popular movies and TV shows from other countries which have different playlists than we might have here in our area, like if you can believe it, The Office, which is not available to watch on Netflix in the USA for whatever reason, by simply switching your location on the VPN. Now you can view streaming content from anywhere in the world quickly and easily. And here's the best part. PIA is the world's most transparent VPN provider with over 30 million downloads. They never record or store any of your personal data, always privately encrypting your internet connection no matter where you are, and it's available for all platforms, all in one easy-to-use program protecting every device in your household. So stop taking chances with your personal information this holiday season. Simply go to piavpn.com/Dan Monroe, or even easier, simply scan this QR code to get an 83% discount on PIA. Yes, 83% off. That's just like a little over $2 a month, and you also get 4 extra months completely free. PIA, keeping your personal information, well, private. So give them a try. I did, and have a wonderful holiday season knowing that your information is for your eyes only. And now back to Blade Runner. Now, although Harrison Ford's portrayal of this character in this movie was extremely well done, he had a bit of a really hard time on set while filming, not happy at all during the entire shoot, often feeling that he wasn't really getting enough direction from Ridley Scott as to what exactly the director wanted him to do, which apparently really pissed Harrison off quite a bit, and according to Hollywood rumor and legend, by the time the shoot ended, neither Ridley Scott nor Harrison Ford were even speaking to each other.
Who can tell with Harrison Ford mumbling all the time anyway, and Ridley's thick English accent?
Keep in mind that prior to this film, Harrison was working with directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, and George Lucas, directors who really included Harrison in the process of understanding and creating the character that he had to play, while Ridley Scott just figured, Harrison Ford's a great actor, he'll know what to do, focusing more on the sets, the lighting, and capturing the overall essence of the image that he wanted portrayed in his film. As long as it looked good to Scott, that's all that really mattered.
You know that scene where Deckard is playing the piano and he's had like 30 whiskey sours?
Yeah?
He starts seeing unicorns like Tom Cruise in Legend. I'm thinking maybe he's a replicant.
What are you saying?
Didn't you catch all the origami paper clues? Do I have to spell it out for you?
Oh, I thought he was trying to make paper airplanes for hamsters. Here's an interesting little Blade Runner tidbit that I wasn't really aware of before starting my research, but as all of you know, the original U.S. theatrical release had a voiceover throughout many parts of the film by Harrison Ford, and apparently Harrison Ford absolutely hated the idea of a voiceover being added to the film. So again, according to Hollywood rumor and legend, Ford intentionally, while recording these voiceovers, made them sound as drab and bland as humanly possible in an attempt, I guess, to voice his disapproval of the narration. I'm not entirely sure what Ridley Scott thought of the voiceovers, but clearly not much, as Ridley removed all of the Harrison Ford narrations from both the director's cut and the final cut of the film.
Here's another tidbit. It was Warner Brothers that wanted the narration as they felt the film was way too difficult to follow as presented. Jury's still out on that one.
Principal photography for Blade Runner began on March 9th, 1981, and concluded a short 4 months later with the Bradbury Building in downtown Los Angeles serving as one of the climactic filming locations. unusual fun fact, according to Ridley Scott, the very first day on the set was a bit of a disaster because not only were they already 5 days behind their shooting schedule, but all of the columns on the Terrell office set were positioned upside down. Apparently somebody really screwed up, so production designer Lawrence G. Paul reluctantly informed the production team that they had just about 5 hours to get all of these enormous columns flipped around the correct way, and that's what they did.
I know. Why not just have the audience stand on their heads in the theater for that scene? I am a truly great problem solver.
I have no words.
This is pretty sad for a lot of reasons, but the final scene of this film was literally shot just hours before the producers were due to come in and take over complete creative control from Ridley Scott, even though years later Ridley Scott made it very well known that the final cut release of this film is his personal favorite version of the movie.
Sure, after screwing with it 7 times, he was happy to walk away.
Production designer Sid Mead was originally hired only to design vehicles and props. However, in his initial sketches and drawings, he included a lot of backgrounds in his images, like streets and what Deckard's apartment might look like. Ridley Scott was so impressed with his work that he asked him to continue designing the environments for the film at a fee of around $1,500 per day, which was one of the reasons why this film went over budget. The special effects in this film are generally recognized as being among the absolute best ever seen in the science fiction genre, and for all of you young people out there, no, there was no CGI. These were real models and real sets being used by real actors, being captured on real cameras, outstanding use of matte paintings and models with special effects techniques, including multi-pass exposures with computer motion-controlled cameras, with many of the effects and techniques being used developed prior for both Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
You gotta hand it to Ridley. This movie has everything. Neon noodles, futuristic bars, LED umbrellas.
Yeah, but the buildings look like somebody glued garbage to a shoebox.
Hey, wait a minute. That's the Millennium Falcon.
From a movie far, far away.
And then there's the spinner, those super cool flying cars used in the film, conceived and designed once again by Sid Mead, who described the spinner as, and I quote, a vehicle which directs air downward to create lift, even though press kits for the film stated that the spinner was propelled by engines. It's a mystery. Who knows? You decide. Lines are open. Mead's designs were transformed into 25 vehicles by legendary automobile customizer Gene Winfield. At least 2 were working ground vehicles, while the others were lightweight mock-ups for crane shots for the scenes where they seemed to levitate off the ground. Apparently 2 of them ended up in Disney World, of all places, in Florida, but were later, of course, destroyed for who knows what reason. A few others do remain today in private collections, and one of the spinners is currently on permanent exhibition at the Mopop Museum in Seattle, Washington, along with several Fred Barton robots as well.
Wow. Shameless plug.
My favorite prop from this film, of course, along with a lot of other people, has to be Deckard's gun, his blaster, and boy, oh boy, do I have a really cool story for you guys about the blaster. Check this out. About 6 months ago, I got an email from a super cool guy named Jay, who has quite the unique involvement with this blaster. He worked at a gun shop called B&B Sales the very day that Robbie Knott of Knott Limited Special Effects came into his gun shop looking for ideas for the Blade Runner blaster.
Wow, seriously, can I say it?
Please don't.
How cool is that?
No kidding, right? Apparently, they looked at a bunch of different firearms, including an air pistol, none of which Pete thought were appropriate, but finally, he saw the unbarreled action of a Steyr Mannlicher rifle, model SL. He put it up on the counter, and then they put a rubber grip up against it, a Bianchi Lightning grip to be exact, and then he took a picture of it, and here is an approximation of what that photo looked like that he took that was supplied by Jay, and build the revolver into a blank firing weapon. So Jay sold the guys the parts, and then off they went to make cinematic Hollywood history, with Jay literally being there on the day that this incredible blaster was conceived. Thank you, Jay, for that amazing information. Absolutely super cool addition to the history and mythology of this amazing blaster. And keep in mind that I do not claim at all to be an expert on this firearm. I just thought all of you would find this information really super interesting.
And whatever happened to the original Hero blaster?
Hang on, we'll get to that. The musical score of Blade Runner on its own is an extremely significant and important part of this film in all of its early 1980s synthesizer glory, but surprisingly, to me anyway, when rewatching this film today, that 1980s style soundtrack still works perfectly for the film, created by Evangelos Odessa Papathanassiou.
That's easy for you to say.
No kidding. More commonly known simply as Vangelis, this Oscar award-winning new age composer delivered a dark yet melodic combination of classic compositions and futuristic synthesizers, which really mirrored the whole film noir retro future theme envisioned by Ridley Scott perfectly, loved by the fans, and critically acclaimed, being nominated in 1982 for both a BAFTA and a Golden Globe Award for Best Original Score. Blade Runner was released on June 25th, 1982 in almost 1,300 theaters, that particular date specifically chosen by producer Alan Ladd Jr. because many of his previous highest-grossing films, like Star Wars and Alien, had a similar opening date, making the 25th of the month his lucky day, so to speak. And even though Blade Runner did pretty good on its opening weekend, earning a little over $6 million, it might just have been released a little too close to other sci-fi fantasy films at the time, including The Thing, Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, E.T., and Tron. So with all that competition in the theaters, it's really no wonder why it didn't reach its full potential, absolutely affecting a lot of its commercial success.
Couldn't they just stream it?
I'll stream you in a minute.
Critically, the film was met with, shall we say, mixed reviews. While some praised the film for its incredible use of story and special effects techniques, others negatively criticized its agonizingly slow pace, with one reviewer from the Los Angeles Times calling it Blade Crawler, and another reviewer calling it science fiction pornography. Nevertheless, the overall consensus was that the film was, and I quote, misunderstood by audiences and critics alike, but is by far the best science fiction film of the year.
Hear, hear.
Okay, but what about all the super cool costumes, models, and props from the film?
Well, back in 2016, one of the original and still working video phones sold at a heritage auction for over $14,000. In 2018, an original Harrison Ford Rick Deckard stunt blaster sold for almost 40 grand. Back in 2009, one of Harrison Ford's costumes sold again at a heritage auction for a little over $47,000. Rutger Hauer's screen-matched Roy Batty leather coat sold at a prop store auction for almost £200,000. Harrison Ford's screen-matched and photo-matched costume from the fight scenes with Rutger Hauer sold for a staggering $289,800. And here, my friends, is the big one, and I do mean the big one. The main hero gun from the Blade Runner film sold back in 2009 at a heritage auction for over $265,000. I mean, come on, folks. Seriously, how freaking cool is that? Super huge thanks once again to James Small for providing a ton of great information. Check out his amazing website at smallartworks.ca for excellence in model building. I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive all about Blade Runner, and if you did and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig.
And if you'd like to help support the channel, you can always buy us a coffee. Link in the description.
And please feel free to stop back anytime as we together continue the conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies,
music, and monsters.